I never planned to find out that day, about the will, about everything my parents thought I deserved. I went over to my parents' house in Raleigh like I always did, keys jingling in my pocket, coat barely buttoned against the late autumn chill. The Carson place looked the same as ever, shutters needing paint, a pile of raked leaves still waiting for Robert to bag them up. The old porch swing swayed a little in the breeze. I'd fixed those rusty chains myself just last summer, after Mom mentioned the squeak was keeping her up at night. Inside, the air was tinged with the scent of cinnamon and something faintly musty, a familiar blend of comfort and old wood. Mom was in the kitchen, hands deep in a mixing bowl, humming some song from her own childhood. She greeted me with that gentle smile of hers, flour dusting her cheek. Dad was hunched over a pile of mail at the dining room table, brow furrowed, glasses sliding down his nose. "Emily, honey. You found us another deal on insurance again, right?" Mom called, voice warm and a little hopeful. I shrugged off my coat, draping it over the same chair I'd claimed since high school. "Just here to help, like always," I said, smiling. I'd lost count of the times I'd driven across town just to decipher some bill or explain a letter from Medicare. As I sat, I caught a glimpse of the calendar pinned to the fridge, every date crammed with reminders in Mom's looping cursive: doctor, pharmacy, call them about heat bill. Dad handed me a stack of papers. "Just the usual stuff. Linda's been on me about getting these scanned before open enrollment closes," he grumbled, not unkindly. There was a time, years back, when Dad could juggle any paperwork, but since retiring, he never quite trusted himself with all the new online forms. He relied on me, and I'd let him. Maybe I even liked it, being needed, being the one they called. I set up the little printer scanner in the corner, a device I'd recommended and set up for them myself. As the first few pages hummed through, I flipped through the pile: utility bills, prescription receipts, Medicare forms, an overdue notice for the water bill. That one I recognized. I'd quietly paid it last month, as I had so many others. Scanning became automatic, almost meditative. I remembered the last time I did this chore, how Mom hugged me a little longer than usual when I left. I'd figured she was just grateful for the help. Funny how the little things stay with you. A cream-colored folder caught my eye, thicker, heavier than the others. Estate plan, final copy, the label read, in Mom's careful hand. I hesitated. I wasn't looking for secrets, but I'd just paid their property tax bill, and I planned to swing by the pharmacy after. It felt like I was part of everything in this house, maybe too much. Before I could second guess, I opened the folder. Inside was the will, notarized 2 months ago. I scanned the pages, not really reading at first. Then I saw it, their house, fully paid off. The remainder of their retirement savings. A life insurance policy. All of it to Robert, my younger brother, the one still living at home, who never finished college but always had a new plan. There was my name, too. Once. A line that read, "We love both our children equally and trust them to care for one another." No mention of the bills I'd covered, the grocery runs, the money wired without being asked. Just a polite way of saying, "You don't need anything, and we don't owe you anything." I sat very still, listening to the scanner's steady hum. My hands were calm, but my heart stuttered in my chest. So this was how they saw me, already taken care of, not someone who needed looking after. The silence pressed in, thick with all the words I'd never said. Dad returned, carrying his chipped coffee mug. "You getting through that stack, Em?" His voice was too casual, his eyes darting to the folder in my lap. He stopped short, coffee halfway to his lips. "Is this how it is, Dad?" I asked, my voice low. "Everything to Robert?" He let out a long, tired sigh, one of those deep ones that seem to come from years of disappointments and unspoken hopes. "It's not what you think," he said, but his words sounded rehearsed. I didn't answer, because it was exactly what I thought. I watched as he set his mug down, hands trembling just slightly. "You've always done well, Em. That's what we always say. You're the strong one." He didn't meet my eyes. There was nothing else to say, not really. I left the folder on the table, the words echoing in my mind. I could feel anger bubbling up, then just as quickly, it drained away, replaced by something cold and final. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to beg for a place in my own family's story. I stood up, grabbing my coat. Mom peeked in from the kitchen, worry etched across her face, but I just smiled, tight-lipped. "I have to go," I said. No one stopped me. Outside, the sky had turned gray, heavy with the promise of rain. I settled onto the porch swing, the one I'd fixed when Robert was between jobs again last summer. The chain creaked as I leaned back, the old oak tree waving its bare branches above the lawn. I thought about all the hours I'd poured into this house, all the ways I'd tried to keep everyone safe and steady. I wondered, for the first time in a long while, what my life meant to them, beyond being the person who always showed up. The swing rocked gently beneath me, and I let myself drift in the quiet, not ready to go home just yet. In life, sometimes the hardest part isn't what's said, but what's left unspoken, the debts never named, the love taken for granted. As the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the porch, I realized I'd spent years carrying this family. Maybe it was time to see what happened when I let go, even just for a little while. All my life, I was the one who stepped up before anyone asked. It started as a habit, then became the pattern everyone expected, like the sun coming up over the oak trees behind our old house in Raleigh. I used to think that was just how families worked. Someone always held things together, patched up what cracked, covered what was missing. I never imagined that person would always be me. I was the kid who did her homework before dinner, set the table, and kept my room neat even when no one was checking. By the time I was 12, I could heat a can of soup for Robert, and I knew where Dad kept the extra fuses. When the power went out one icy night, Mom called me from work, panicked, and I calmly told her, "I've got it covered." That's just how it was. If there was a problem, I solved it. If something was left undone, it tugged at me until I fixed it. I remember the summer before college, when I spent every spare hour at my job bagging groceries just to help with the August bills. Mom's car broke down that July, and while Robert shrugged and said, "She can borrow Dad's," I researched used parts online, called 3 shops, and even borrowed a socket wrench from the neighbor to help Dad fix it in our driveway. Nobody asked me to, I just saw what needed doing. At the end of that week, Mom slipped me a $10 bill, calling me her little lifesaver. It felt like the best tip I'd ever earned. But the older I got, the bigger the problems became. There was the property tax bill that showed up just before Christmas a few years back, and the mortgage notice that nearly got lost under a pile of grocery ads. I'd sit at my apartment table, running my own numbers and then quietly moving money over to my parents' accounts so nothing would bounce. Most times, I never mentioned it. If Mom noticed groceries magically restocked or the electric stayed on after a storm, she just smiled and said, "You're so thoughtful, Em." It never became a discussion. When I got my first real job offer in Chicago, better pay, bigger title, a city full of promise, I hesitated. The plan was to visit, tour apartments, maybe even start fresh. But when Mom caught a cold that turned into pneumonia, I ended up postponing my trip, staying to drive her to doctor appointments. Dad assured me, "You go if you need to. We'll be fine." But I stayed anyway. Chicago faded into something I might have done in another life. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder what would have happened if I'd gone. Mostly, I reminded myself that family mattered more. Robert, meanwhile, was always described as finding his way. He was 2 years younger, smart but restless. He tried community college for a year, then dropped out, saying it just wasn't a fit. He worked odd jobs, grocery stocker, pizza delivery, a short stint at a music store, but nothing stuck. My parents called it his season of figuring things out, and they'd defend him at every family dinner. He just needs time, Mom would say, her hand on his arm. He's creative, not the 9-to-5 type. Dad would look at me and smile, as if to say, "Isn't it great that you're so reliable?" For every mistake Robert made, I made up for it twice over. When his old car got repossessed, I was the one who offered to drive him to interviews, or at least pay for an Uber when he got a call back. I'd spend evenings researching affordable health insurance when he turned 26 and got dropped from Mom's plan. When he missed deadlines for FAFSA, I sent links and reminders, and when that didn't work, I let it go and quietly upped my own contributions to the family grocery fund. There were so many little rescues. When the furnace broke down last January, Dad called me before he called a repairman. I wired the deposit before the contractor even arrived, just so no one would be left cold. Mom texted a thank you with a heart emoji, and I responded with a thumbs up, sitting alone in my own apartment and microwaving leftover lasagna. It wasn't that I resented helping. For years, I wore the label steady like a badge. Friends would say, "Your parents are lucky," and I'd smile and nod. It felt good, in a quiet way, to be depended on. It meant I mattered. Or at least, that's what I thought. But now, sitting in my apartment surrounded by stacks of old receipts and the quiet hum of my aging fridge, I started to wonder what it all amounted to. I could list every bill I'd paid, every Saturday lost to errands, every time I put my own plans on hold for someone else's emergency. Yet, when it came down to it, my parents' words in that will told a different story. Robert deserved what little they had left, not because of what he'd done, but because he needed it. My own sacrifices weren't even footnotes. I let myself revisit the memory of turning down that job in Chicago. It wasn't just about the money or the title, it was a chance to choose for myself. I told myself family needed me, and maybe they did. Or maybe I just didn't know how to say no. All those years, I believed being steady was enough. That it would bring security, maybe even gratitude. But now, I saw it differently. Being steady just meant I was always available. That my needs didn't have to be considered, because I'd figure it out. No one would ask if I was okay, because I'd always say yes. Somewhere along the line, I realized I'd been conditioned not to expect thanks, or even acknowledgement. I'd learned to keep giving until there was nothing left for myself, and call it love. Maybe that's what families do, raise you to believe that showing up means giving everything, even when no one is keeping score except you. That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table, phone lighting up with another text from Mom. "Can you send the electric bill? I'll pay you back Friday." I stared at the message a long time before answering. For once, I didn't respond. I let it sit there, unread. A thought crept in, what would happen if I just stopped? Stopped paying the bills, stopped checking in, stopped being the invisible safety net. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? Or would they just move on to the next solution, the next person to patch the hole? That night, as the city lights blinked through my window, I made a decision, quiet, almost invisible. I would let the bills go unpaid, the reminders expire. I would step back and see if my absence left a mark, or if I was always meant to be the silent one, cleaning up the messes no one wanted to name. Sometimes the price of being steady is learning that no one remembers the person who holds up the world, until the day she puts it down. I didn't make an announcement, I just stopped holding everything together. After years of jumping in before anyone asked, I finally let myself pause, let the world around me settle without my hands steadying every loose screw and shaky shelf. Winter settled in over Raleigh, thin sunlight across frost-rimmed lawns, the neighborhood already quiet after Thanksgiving but not yet wrapped in Christmas lights. I changed my routine in tiny, almost invisible ways. I deleted the auto payments for my parents' utilities, one at a time. The electricity bill, then the water, then the weekly grocery delivery I'd set up years ago, one less charge on my credit card, one less reminder on my phone. I stopped checking their accounts, stopped scrolling through my reminders at midnight, making sure everything would go through before a service got cut off. The silence felt strange at first. For years, my evenings were punctuated by the small alarms of responsibility, a text from Mom needing a prescription filled, a phone call from Dad about the cable bill, Robert's offhand request for gas money. Now my phone lay still and silent on the kitchen counter, as if it, too, was learning what it meant to rest. The first week passed with nothing unusual. I half expected a call about the missing groceries, maybe a mention of an unpaid balance when Mom ran her errands. But instead, there was only the regular holiday small talk. Did you see how cold it's supposed to get this weekend? Don't forget your winter tires, Em. I smiled, agreed, but kept my updates vague. If they noticed anything amiss, they didn't say. One memory drifted in and out of my mind, a winter a few years back, when Robert forgot to pick up Mom's prescription and she spent a day in bed, too tired to go out herself. I stopped by after work, handed her the medicine with a mug of soup. She patted my hand, then changed the subject, and Robert never apologized. I was the fixer, the one who filled in the gaps without anyone noticing the cracks. By the second week, small signs started to appear. I got a text from Dad, water bill seems high this month. Did you change something in the online account? I let it sit unread. The answer was simple, I hadn't changed anything. For the first time, I let someone else wonder, let the question hang in the air. The groceries dwindled at their house, and Mom sent me a photo of her nearly empty fridge, a string of laughing emojis beneath it. Time for a big shopping trip, she wrote. I replied with a thumbs up, resisting the urge to fill a cart online and hit order. In another world, I'd have done it before she asked, before she even knew what she needed. But this time, I stayed still. On social media, Aunt Tracy posted a cheerful throwback, the whole Carson family gathered around a Thanksgiving table, me at the far end, refilling water glasses. Thankful for our helpers, the caption read. I scrolled past without clicking like. Mom called me midweek, her voice upbeat, asking if I'd visit for Sunday dinner. I hesitated, not wanting to risk an awkward conversation. I've got a work project, Mom, maybe next weekend. I made my excuses, knowing she'd accept them, at least for now. Winter deepened. I cooked simple meals for myself, watched the streetlights flicker on at dusk, listened to the hum of my own life with a quiet relief. I wondered how long it would take before someone noticed I'd stepped out of my role. Sometimes, change is so quiet you don't realize it's happening until something gives way. The third week, everything changed. Mom's text came late on a Thursday, direct and to the point, mortgage is due. Can you send what you usually do? No greeting, no how are you? Just a need and a number. I stared at her message for a long time, remembering every time I'd transferred money without a second thought, every time I'd saved them from a late fee or a shutdown notice. This time, my fingers hovered over the keys, steady as ever. I typed back, ask Robert. It's his house now. And with that, I turned off my phone, letting the silence settle in. It wasn't anger or spite that pushed me, just the quiet realization that I had finally stopped being the invisible safety net. If there was a mess to clean up, someone else would have to lift a hand. For once, I would let things unravel, and see what happened next. The silence from my parents grew heavy, until it suddenly turned loud. For weeks, the quiet had almost felt like relief. My phone had stopped lighting up with reminders and requests. The space in my mind that had always been filled with other people's needs was now, for the first time in years, empty. But silence has a way of drawing attention to itself, and in my family, peace is never the final act. I spent more evenings in my apartment, reading or listening to music while winter pressed against the windows. Outside, the world seemed to slow down, bare trees, neighbors hurrying indoors before dusk, Christmas decorations appearing one by one on porches up and down the block. I kept my phone on the counter, volume turned low, a habit that felt both freeing and unnatural. At first, my parents' messages remained polite. Mom sent a picture of an old photo she found, me as a child, smiling in a homemade Halloween costume. "Remember this, Em? Such good times." I responded with a heart, nothing more. Dad's texts grew shorter. "Can you help with the phone bill this month? Any chance you're coming by this weekend?" I let them sit. Guilt tugged at me, but I held the line. But soon, the tone began to shift. The messages came faster, edged with worry and frustration. "Is something wrong? Did we do something?" Mom wrote one afternoon. "We haven't heard from you. Are you upset about something?" Dad asked, his words clipped. I wanted to reply, to smooth things over, but every time I started, the ache in my chest pulled my hand away from the screen. It didn't take long for the circle to widen. Aunt Tracy left a voicemail, her voice bright but strained. "Hey, sweetheart, just checking in. Your mom says you haven't been by in a while. Hope everything's alright. Call me when you can, okay?" I listened, then deleted the message. The background noise of family concern was rising, even as I tried to shut it out. On Facebook, things took a turn. I rarely posted, but I checked in out of habit, scrolling past photos of people's dogs and Christmas trees and engagement announcements. Then I saw it, a status from Mom, her profile picture smiling in front of last year's Thanksgiving turkey. We give everything to our children, but sometimes giving isn't enough. Some lessons are harder than others. Dozens of likes and sympathetic comments followed. Aunt Tracy replied with a row of hearts. Cousin Madison simply liked the post, no words, just a silent nod of approval. Dad joined in the next day. His message was less poetic, more direct. "We thought we raised our kids right, but sometimes you can't make someone care. Family is about showing up when it matters." He tagged me in the post. The tag stung, more than I wanted to admit. For a long time, I'd been the one who showed up, first at the hospital when Mom was sick, first at home when the pipes burst, first with a checkbook when the bills piled up. Now my absence was the problem to solve. Robert chimed in as well, sharing Dad's post with his own caption, "Some people only care about family when they're getting something." The irony made me laugh, bitter and brief. My brother, who had never once offered to split a bill or help with a repair, now painting himself as the loyal son. The comments rolled in, people I barely remembered from high school or church expressing sympathy for my parents, for Robert, for the child who stayed. "You're such a good son, Robert," someone wrote. "Your sister should be ashamed." The world my parents built online was both familiar and foreign, full of love and judgment, old stories and new resentments. I watched as my absence became the new headline, my silence turned into an accusation. One night, as I scrolled through the notifications, a memory surfaced, being 10 years old, praised for not making trouble. "You're our easy one, Dad used to say. You don't ask for much, never cause a scene." I had learned to be helpful and quiet, believing that keeping the peace was a kind of love. Now, it seemed, my quiet was the thing they couldn't stand. As the days passed, I noticed friends and coworkers glancing at me with a new kind of curiosity. "Everything okay with your folks?" my boss asked, not quite making eye contact. Word had traveled quickly, the family story bending to fit whatever shape the teller needed. I wondered if anyone cared about my version. The guilt rose and fell, tides of emotion I couldn't quite control. Sometimes I wanted to call and shout, "Do you really not see what you're doing?" But mostly, I stayed quiet, letting the noise wash over me. I spent more time alone, reading, walking the neighborhood, baking cookies I didn't share. It was strange, this new freedom, tinged with loneliness. Late one evening, as I washed dishes by the yellow glow of the kitchen light, my phone buzzed again. Mom's name appeared on the screen, her number shining in the dark. I hesitated, hand hovering over the device. I let it ring, my own silence now the loudest thing in the room. They didn't lose me when they wrote me out of the will, they lost me when they assumed I'd always stay. For weeks, I'd been bracing myself for something to break, but nothing prepared me for how loud the breaking would be when it finally came. Spring came slowly to Raleigh that year, chilly winds pulling at the last brittle leaves as green shoots tried to force their way from the soil. Change, I learned, always comes in fits and starts, never neat, never silent. It started at work. I'd just finished lunch in the break room, lukewarm coffee cooling in my hand, when the receptionist peeked in, eyes wide. "Emily? There's some folks here for you." Said it's urgent. "Family, I think." My stomach dropped. There was only one kind of family emergency these days. I stepped into the lobby and saw them, Dad, stiff and upright, arms crossed over his chest, Mom clutching her purse, eyes darting between me and the elevator, Robert slouched beside them, hands jammed in his pockets, jaw set in a way that tried too hard to look tough. For a second, I thought about turning and walking the other way, just to prove I could. But I stayed. I owed them that much, or maybe, I just owed it to myself. "We need to talk," Dad said, voice tight. "We couldn't get a hold of you." The words hit the tiled floor and stayed there, awkward and heavy. I could feel the eyes of the front desk staff flickering over us, curious but careful. "Now's not a good time," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I have meetings." "It can't wait," Mom said, her tone pleading and a little desperate. "Emily, please. We're not leaving until we talk." She reached out as if to take my hand, but I stepped back. "We can do this here. In the lobby. No invitations. No bringing the mess upstairs into the world I'd built for myself." For a moment, no one spoke. Dad glanced at the receptionist, then at Robert, then back at me. "We're in trouble, Em. You know the house, if we don't get the mortgage payment in this week, we could lose it. We're behind on everything. We thought you'd help, like always." I breathed in, feeling the familiar tug, the reflex to step forward, to solve, to be the one who saved the day. But I stayed where I was. "I can't do that anymore," I said. "You chose to put everything in Robert's name. You decided what I meant to this family. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Robert bristled, eyes narrow. "That's not fair, Em. This isn't what I wanted. I never asked for." "But you took it," I cut in, my voice sharper than I meant. "You took everything they gave you. You let them believe I didn't matter. And now you want me to fix it?" Dad's face tightened. "Family sticks together. That's what I always said. You don't just turn your back when things get hard. I never turned my back, I replied. I just finally stopped carrying all of you. I did my part, over and over. And all I got was a line and a will and 100 little requests for help. Mom's hand shook as she pulled a tissue from her purse. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you'd understand. You've always been so strong. Strong doesn't mean invisible, Mom. My voice softened, the edge replaced by weariness. I kept everything afloat for years. Not because I had to, but because I wanted you to feel safe. And I never asked for much. Just to be seen. There was a long pause, the kind that comes when everyone runs out of reasons and is left with the truth. For the first time, I looked at each of them not as my family, but as people, flawed, tired, scared. And for the first time, I let myself feel how much it hurt to be standing on the outside. We need you, Dad said, quieter now. Isn't that enough? I shook my head, tears stinging behind my eyes but refusing to fall. Not anymore. Robert stepped forward, voice low. You think this makes you better? Walking away now? I looked at him, really looked, and saw all the years between us, all the ways we'd let each other down. No, I said. It just makes me free. With that, I stepped aside, letting them pass. As they left, Mom paused to look back, but I stayed rooted, my arms folded. For the first time, I didn't chase after them. The lobby emptied out, the staff returning to their screens, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. I felt a hollowness, but also, somehow, lighter, as if I'd set down a burden so old I'd forgotten its weight. And as the doors closed behind my family, I realized I might be alone, but for the first time in a long while, I was truly standing on my own 2 feet. Sometimes you don't have to set the fire, you just have to stop carrying the water. That thought drifted through my mind as I turned off the main road and walked slowly through the old neighborhood, the late spring sun warming my arms and the smell of cut grass mingling with something faintly bittersweet. It had been weeks since the confrontation in the lobby, and the silence that followed was thicker than ever. No more calls, no more pleas, just the hum of my own life, finally untangled from theirs. I hadn't planned to come back. In truth, I'd driven past the turnoff 3 times before parking at the edge of the block and letting my feet carry me home, out of old habit or maybe unfinished business. The houses looked smaller than I remembered, the paint on some porches fresh, others peeling, kids' bikes scattered on the sidewalk. The Carson house sat halfway down the street, flanked by the tall oak trees Dad had planted the year Robert was born. The porch swing was gone, replaced by empty hooks and a faded patch of wood where it used to creak in the summer breeze. A bold red for sale sign was staked in the front yard, the kind that seemed almost defiant. Look here, a life-changing hands. I stood across the street, watching the way the sunlight slanted over the mailbox I'd once painted with Mom, our initials carved on the underside. My breath caught a little, not with surprise but with an ache I had expected and tried to steel myself against. Mrs. Landry, the neighbor who'd lived next door since I was a kid, stepped out to water her roses. She was older now, her hair all silver, but her wave was as warm as ever. Emily? Oh honey, I didn't expect to see you here. I crossed over, forcing a smile. Just passing through, I said, which was only half a lie. She set down her watering can, studied my face. It's been a tough time for your folks, I hear. I hope you're all right, dear. Your mother said things were complicated. I told her, families get through these storms together. I thanked her, the words sticking in my throat. There was nothing left to explain. We talked about the weather, the way the neighborhood had changed, the high school's new principal. She reached out, squeezed my hand. Be gentle with yourself, Emily. Life's too short for heavy hearts. I promised I would try. After she'd gone, I wandered up to the sidewalk in front of the house, hands stuffed deep in my pockets. The grass was overgrown, the porch light off in the middle of the day, a little sign that nobody was coming home at night. My reflection swam in the front window, overlaying the rooms where I'd spent most of my life, the kitchen where Mom baked cinnamon bread, the living room where Dad read the paper, the stairs where Robert and I used to race on Saturday mornings. It all seemed so far away, like a memory belonging to someone else. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Dad, "The house is listed. I don't know what else to do. I hope you're happy." There was no anger in the words, just a resignation that made my chest tight. I read it twice, then let the phone drop back into my bag. A voicemail from Mom waited too. I listened to her voice, tired and soft. I wish things had turned out different. We're doing our best. Please call me when you can. I didn't reply. I watched the clouds move across the yard, a gentle wind making the branches sway. Later, as I scrolled through social media out of habit, I saw the posts piling up. Mom shared a sunflower photo, captioned, "Sometimes love isn't enough, but we keep trying." Dad's words were sharper, "You raise your kids right and hope they remember who kept the lights on." Robert, of course, leaned into the story, posting photos of the empty rooms, lyrics about being left behind, comments from friends piling up, "So sorry, man. Family's tough." It was easier, somehow, to be the villain in their story than to try to rewrite it. Maybe that was freedom too. Standing there, I felt a wave of sadness for the home I'd spent so much of my life trying to hold together. The ache was real, but so was the relief, the knowledge that my absence had finally left a mark no one could ignore. I hadn't set this in motion out of malice. I'd simply stopped being the solution, and now, for better or worse, the world was adjusting. I let my hand rest on the porch railing, feeling the grooves of old paint and wood, remembering the summer days we spent sanding and repainting as a family. I saw us, Dad with his radio playing oldies, Mom with a scarf over her hair, Robert with streaks of blue on his hands, me careful and methodical, determined to do it right. We were never perfect, but we tried. Sometimes love looks like effort, sometimes it looks like letting go. My phone buzzed again, a new message from Mom. This time, I didn't check it. I stood for another minute, listening to the distant sound of a lawn mower, the hush of traffic, the gentle creak of a house that no longer belonged to me. Then I turned away, heading back down the street toward my car, the sunlight falling warm across my shoulders. This time, I didn't look back. Sometimes the only way forward is to walk away, and trust that, even with empty hands, you're finally free to choose what you'll carry next. The echo of an empty house is different when it's your childhood ringing in the silence. Some days, I'd wake up convinced I could hear the ghost of my own laughter, a memory of footsteps racing down the old carpeted hallway, the kitchen radio humming over Mom's singing. But summer in Raleigh pressed on, sunlight flooding my apartment through wide windows that faced away from everything I once called home. By June, the Carsons had become a story everyone in the family circle seemed to know. It was the story of late bills and missed payments, of David and Linda struggling to hold things together without the invisible glue of a daughter who'd finally let go. The grass at the old house grew longer, the porch stayed dark at night, and the mailbox filled with more bank letters than birthday cards. It wasn't just the house that unraveled. Distant relatives, folks I hadn't seen since high school graduations, began to whisper. Aunt Patty in South Carolina texted, "Hope you and your parents are patching things up." Cousin Ben tagged me in a photo from an ancient family reunion, then left a comment under one of Mom's posts, rooting for the Carsons. Family first. That phrase made me laugh and ache at the same time. Where was family when I was holding up the walls? Mom and Dad reached out in new ways, sometimes kind, sometimes sharp. Dad sent a voicemail one afternoon, the exhaustion heavy in his words. The bank's threatening to take the house. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. If you can call, maybe we can figure something out. It wasn't anger, not exactly, but it wasn't the old Dad either. I listened, heart thudding, then deleted the message before I could think better of it. Mom tried another approach, sharing bright, hopeful pictures on social media, her garden, a loaf of banana bread, a sunlit porch. But every caption was edged with something mournful. Even sunshine feels cold some days. Prayers for our family as we weather this season. Friends chimed in, offering encouragement or, more often, thinly veiled advice. Aunt Tracy called me late on a Tuesday, her voice brisk but loaded. Honey, your mom's worried sick. Why don't you come for dinner? Let's put the past behind us. Life's too short. She meant well. They all did. I let her words drift past, answered with non-committal promises. Maybe next week, Tracy. Work's busy. I wasn't sure what else to say. The space I'd carved out for myself in my small apartment was finally peaceful, though sometimes, in the quietest hours, I missed the noise I used to resent. Robert, ever the storyteller, took his story public. He posted a photo of the empty living room, sunlight slanting across bare floors where the furniture used to sit. His caption was short, "You can give everything and still be left alone." The comments poured in. You deserve better, Rob. Not everyone understands what family means. Keep your head up. I read them all, unseen, feeling the sting of being cast as villain in a tale I'd never written. The practical things piled up for my parents, past due notices, bounced checks, a final warning from the mortgage company. I could have stepped in, called the bank, sent another transfer. My hands twitched with old reflexes. But I held steady. If you always run into the fire, no one ever learns to use the extinguisher. In early July, a thick envelope arrived at my apartment, addressed in Dad's careful script. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. Inside was a copy of the foreclosure notice, clipped neatly to a blank sheet of printer paper. No note, no plea, just the facts. A silent kind of blame, heavier than any argument. I sat at my kitchen table, running my fingers over the edge of the paper, feeling both guilt and a strange relief. I had always been the buffer, the fixer, the one who prevented disaster. Now, for the first time, the disaster was theirs alone. I wondered if I would ever set foot in that house again, if it would belong to another family by fall, if a new kid would stick their initials in the old oak, never knowing who had come before. Would anyone remember the girl who patched the roof, who fixed the fence, who filled the freezer and brought home Christmas lights? Sometimes, at night, I'd drive past the neighborhood, headlights flickering off the sign at the corner. I never turned down the old street. Instead, I watched from a distance, trying to make peace with the echo of my own absence. The fallout wasn't a single moment, it was a long, slow letting go. I kept my distance, learned to live in the empty space where obligation used to be. The quiet hurt, but it was honest. And in its echo, I began, slowly, to hear my own voice again. I watched everything I worked for go up for sale, and realized none of it was really mine. The day the Carson house was set for auction, the air was thick and slow, the late summer sun making the sidewalk shimmer. I drove across town in silence, no music on, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn back at every red light, but habit, and maybe duty, pushed me forward. Dad's old advice rang in my head, don't get attached to things you can't take with you. But I'd spent so many years carrying that house, I wasn't sure how to let it go. When I pulled up, the street looked both familiar and foreign. Balloons were tied to the mailbox, bright and out of place, advertising an open house and auction that felt more like a circus than an ending. A small cluster of people stood on the front lawn, real estate agents with clipboards, couples with hopeful faces, a few neighbors watching from their porches, their curiosity only half hidden. The old oak tree stood sentry by the sidewalk, leaves fluttering down into the gutter. For a second, I remembered Robert carving his initials there, years ago, while Mom yelled at him to be careful with the knife. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. Nobody greeted me. I moved through the open front door and into the living room, which seemed stripped bare of everything but sunlight and the faintest trace of furniture grooves in the carpet. Gone were the faded blue sofa, the framed graduation photos, the rack of muddy boots by the kitchen. The smell of cinnamon and old wood lingered, mixed with the sharp scent of fresh paint. People wandered from room to room, peering into closets, tapping on walls, whispering in low voices. I watched a couple open a kitchen cabinet, my hiding spot for Christmas gifts as a kid. Two boys raced upstairs to claim bedrooms, their laughter bouncing down the empty hallway. An older man inspected the water heater and scribbled notes. It was all business, all surface. No one saw what I saw: the patch of linoleum Mom replaced after a kitchen fire, the dent in the banister from Robert's skateboard, the strip of wallpaper I never finished peeling. No sign of Robert. I hadn't seen or heard from him since the confrontation in the lobby. My parents were somewhere, maybe in their car or maybe already gone. They hadn't answered my last message, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever see them again. It was as if the house itself had expelled all of us, tired of the weight we'd put on it. On my way upstairs, a neighbor caught my arm, Mrs. Landry, her face crinkled with sympathy. "Hard to believe it's all happening so fast, isn't it, Emily?" she murmured. "Your folks must be beside themselves." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. "It doesn't feel real yet." She patted my hand, then moved on, letting me linger in the upstairs hallway. I paused at the door to my old bedroom. The walls were a blank, neutral beige now, but I could still see the outline where my posters had hung, the nail holes from the fairy lights I'd strung up in high school. The built-in closet was empty except for a single wire hanger. I opened the window and let the breeze in, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the memories play out: Robert and me trading Halloween candy, Dad helping with algebra, Mom reading to us on stormy nights. Downstairs, the auctioneer's voice carried through the house, brisk and confident. People made their way outside, the energy shifting from quiet curiosity to hungry anticipation. I watched from the top of the stairs as the bidding began. Each number called out felt like another memory leaving me behind. Meanwhile, on my phone, notifications buzzed without pause. Social media was ablaze with opinions, some subtle, others cruel. Such a shame, after all those years. I heard the daughter ran off and left them. Not everyone values family these days. Robert had posted a black and white photo of the empty porch swing, his caption simple: "Sometimes you lose more than a house." The comments flooded in: "Stay strong, Rob, you deserved better. Some people only care about themselves." My reputation, once quiet and steady, was now a story spun out of my control. When the auction ended and the new owners shook hands with the agent, I slipped away upstairs. In my old room, I knelt by the built-in drawer in the closet and pulled it open. Using the stub of a pencil I found in the back, I wrote a single line on the bare wood: "We tried our best. Please be gentle with this home." I tore a scrap from an old grocery receipt in my purse, folded it, and tucked it deep inside the drawer. As I left, I took one last look at the house, sunlight pouring through the open door, laughter echoing from the street, strangers making plans where my family's stories used to live. For a heartbeat, grief and relief pressed close together, like old friends or bitter rivals. I had held on so tightly for so long, believing that the house itself was proof of my care, my worth, my place in the world. I walked out to my car, keys jangling in my hand, the future wide and uncertain ahead. As I drove away, I didn't look back, not at the house, not at the street, not at the family I couldn't save. The home was gone, and for the first time I was free to wonder where, or what, home might mean next. When your story gets rewritten by everyone else, you start questioning your own memories. The summer drifted into late August, heavy with humidity and the scent of rain on hot pavement, but it felt like the world was receding from me in layers, family, friends, even myself, as if I was standing behind glass while someone else narrated my life. In the quiet of my apartment, I checked my phone less and less, but words still managed to seep in. At work, people glanced at me with a new curiosity. A colleague lingered by the coffee machine, voice lowered, "Did you see what Emily's mom posted?" Someone else replied, "Families are complicated, huh?" I wanted to shout, to say that things aren't always what they seem. Instead, I just kept stirring my coffee, staring at the swirl of cream dissolving, and felt the room shrink around me. It was surreal, watching myself become a character in other people's conversations. The things my parents wrote online found their way into every corner of my life. We gave everything to our children, but sometimes it isn't enough. There was a photo of the old house, porch light off, captioned with a Bible verse about sacrifice. Comments poured in, "Praying for you." Kids these days don't understand. And under all of it, silence from the people who used to know me best. Kelly, my cousin, the one who once said, "You're the glue in this family," now simply liked a post that implied I was the one who let everyone down. No message, no check-in, just that silent endorsement, and it hurt more than I expected. Madison, always eager to play peacemaker, reposted a memory of us as children, arms linked in front of Grandma's house, smiles bright and uncomplicated. The caption, "Miss when things were simple." I wondered if she meant it for me, or just for herself. The story my family told grew roots, spread, and hardened into something unrecognizable. I scrolled through the posts late at night, reading the words like a stranger. We always tried our best, but sometimes you can't save someone who doesn't want saving. You can't force someone to love you. My mother's voice in digital ink, as if saying it enough would make it true. My own memories began to flicker at the edges, details growing dim. I remembered birthday parties where I handed out slices of cake, the Christmas mornings when I woke up first, brewing coffee for everyone before they came downstairs. But was I really the glue, or just the filler? Had I made things better, or simply quieter? It became hard to know which version was real, the one I lived, or the one they shared. Some days, I tried to reclaim my story in small ways. I rearranged my apartment, hung new curtains, bought a plant I'd always wanted but never bothered to keep before. I started going for walks in the evening, circling the same blocks, learning the names of my neighbors' dogs, feeling the simple relief of being seen without being known. At work, I poured myself into projects, keeping my head down, but the whispers still found me. An email, intended for someone else, ended up in my inbox. I heard she stopped helping her parents. Can you imagine? I deleted it, hands trembling, then sat in the break room for a long time, staring out the window. The isolation was the hardest part, not the loneliness, exactly, but the sensation of being erased from your own life. To have your story reworked by others, until the only thing left of you is the outline of a villain or a stranger. I ached for someone to ask my side, to remember who I'd been before all this. One afternoon, as the sky threatened rain, I checked the mail and found a letter addressed in my mother's handwriting. No return address, no note slipped under the door, just a pale blue envelope, thick with the weight of things unsaid. I sat at my kitchen table, the apartment unusually still, and turned the envelope over in my hands, unsure if I was ready to open it. For the first time in months, I felt hope flicker with dread, wondering if the story would finally change, or if, after all, I was truly on my own. Sometimes an apology comes only after the damage can't be undone. I sat at my kitchen table, the soft glow of the pendant lamp pooling across a patch of wood worn smooth by 1,000 dinners, 100 late-night cups of tea. Outside, the world was hushed by rain, the gentle rhythm on the glass matching the ache I carried in my chest. In front of me lay the blue envelope, its edges curled just slightly, my name spelled out in my mother's careful, looping script. I held it for a long time before opening it, tracing the letters, remembering the way Mom used to sign my school permission slips, the little heart she'd sometimes add next to her name. In the silence, memories came easily, Mom and her favorite blue cardigan, the one she wore when life pressed in too close. I could see her in the doorway, wringing the sleeves between her fingers, searching for words she hadn't practiced but needed to say. That sweater had been a fixture in every hard moment, a band-aid for bruised feelings, a shield in family storms. Now, it was just a memory. She probably kept it at the back of her closet, like I kept the old birthday cards I could never quite throw away. With a deep breath, I unfolded the letter and let her words spill out across the page and into my kitchen. Emily. I know I don't have the right to ask you to read this, but I hope you will. I've tried 100 times to find the words in person, but it's easier on paper. Maybe because I don't have to see your face, or maybe because I'm afraid I won't be able to say everything out loud before I lose my nerve. I am sorry. I'm sorry for every moment you felt taken for granted, for every time we let your quiet kindness slip by without thanks. I wish I could say it was intentional, but sometimes it's even worse when things just happen because we're too tired, too scared, or too lost to notice. We thought we were being fair, that we were doing what was best for everyone, but I see now that fair can sometimes be a wound all its own. I was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if we let Robert fall, if we admitted that you were carrying more than your share. I told myself you were strong enough, that you didn't need us in the way he did. But I realize now that strength is lonely. I wish I had seen that sooner. I miss you. Not just the you that brings groceries or pays bills, but the girl who told stories at the dinner table, who made me laugh when I was sure I'd forgotten how. I would give anything to go back, to choose differently. I know I can't undo what's done. I only hope that, someday, you'll let us try again. Or at least, that you'll let yourself be happy, even if it's without us. Love, Mom. My hands trembled as I set the letter down. I read it twice, then again, each line carving out a hollow and filling it with a new ache. For the first time since everything fell apart, I let myself cry, real, shaking sobs that left me pressed against the cool wood of the table, tears soaking into my sleeve. It wasn't the loss of the house, or even the years of silent sacrifice, but the simple, brutal truth: love sometimes comes too late, and not in the way you need. The kitchen blurred into 1,000 memories, Mom sitting across from me, slicing apples for pie, her cardigan sleeves dusted with flour. Dad tapping the table, waiting for his coffee. Robert bursting in with news about a test or a song he'd written. All the quiet moments I'd tried to keep alive, now just echoes. I thought about forgiveness. About what it would mean to reach back, to open the door I'd finally closed. I wondered if there was a version of the future where we could all begin again, something new, smaller, more honest. Maybe time would soften the hurt. Maybe it wouldn't. I wasn't sure. When the tears slowed, I pulled a sheet of paper from my desk and smoothed it flat, my hand still unsteady. I wrote slowly, choosing each word with care. Mom. Thank you for your letter. I needed to hear it, even if it hurt. I'm still finding my way forward. I need time, maybe someday we can talk more. Please take care of yourself. I hope you find some peace, too. Emily. I folded my reply, slipped it into an envelope, and addressed it to the only home I'd ever known, even if it belonged to someone else now. At the mailbox, the rain had stopped, the air fresh and heavy. I let the letter fall and listened to the soft clatter as it landed inside, the sound of something ending and maybe, if I let it, something beginning. Walking back to my apartment, I felt lighter for having spoken, lonelier for having no one to hear. Sometimes, I thought, the bravest thing you can do is forgive at a distance, loving yourself enough to let go, even if no one else understands. That night, I slept with the window cracked open, the summer air curling around my shoulders, carrying away the old sorrow, making space, at last, for whatever might come next. Grief and freedom can look the same in the mirror if you stand back far enough. Sometimes, in the new apartment, a space that echoed with quiet and possibility, I caught glimpses of both. The mornings were different now, gentle and slow. I no longer woke to the ping of someone else's need. No one's grocery list but mine, no reminders from Mom's calendar inked in careful blue. Just sunlight slipping through pale curtains and the faint hum of city life outside my window. The first Saturday after the letter, I cooked breakfast just for myself. Scrambled eggs, toast with blackberry jam, coffee rich and dark. I sat by the window, bare feet curled beneath me, and listened to the soft patter of rain against the glass. For once, there was no rush. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, letting the silence wrap around me like a favorite sweater. It was lonely, yes, but there was sweetness in it, too, a kind of promise that maybe I could learn to belong to myself. Work was steady, almost comforting in its routine. Sasha, a co-worker with kind eyes and a talent for reading people, started inviting me to lunch. At first, I hesitated, unsure how to make small talk that wasn't laced with apology or explanation. But Sasha was gentle, steering the conversation toward favorite books and travel dreams, never prying into family matters. "You seem lighter these days," she remarked one afternoon, as we shared soup at a little cafe near the office. "Like you're finally breathing for yourself." I smiled, surprised at how true it felt. That fall, I tried new things. I signed up for a community garden plot and planted late tomatoes, my hands in the dirt, marveling at how something so small could still grow after a long, hard season. I attended a pottery class on a whim, shaping clumsy bowls that wobbled on the wheel. It didn't matter if they were perfect. The act of making was enough. Mom called sometimes, leaving voicemails that were less about bills and more about the weather, the neighbor's new dog, the recipe she tried last week. I listened, sometimes smiled, but rarely called back. My boundaries were gentle but firm, a fence, not a wall. When I felt guilt tugging at me, I remembered the truth: you can care without surrendering yourself. Sometimes love means saying not now, and trusting that the people you love will find their own way. One evening, Sasha texted me in a panic. Her car had broken down on the far side of town, and she was stranded, rain pouring down. Old habits rose up, my fingers itching to grab my keys, to fix, to save. But I paused. I texted back, "Do you need me to call you a tow or just keep you company on the phone while you wait?" Sasha responded, grateful for the offer but handling it herself. Relief mingled with pride. I'd offered help, but I hadn't made myself the solution. As the days shortened, leaves drifting red and gold outside my window, I started to see myself differently. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror one quiet evening, hair loose, face tired but clear-eyed. Not just the helper, not just the fixer, not the steady background character in someone else's story. I was still learning to live with both grief and freedom, their weight balanced on opposite sides of the same scale. Some days I missed what I'd lost, aching for the comfort of old routines, even the exhausting ones. Other days, I relished the space I'd found, the time to rest, to read, to wonder what I wanted for myself. As I stood there, looking at myself, not through the lens of family, or obligation, or old pain, but just as me, I felt a quiet sense of arrival. I was here. I was whole. And for the first time, I believed I might stay that way, even as the world outside kept changing. I used to think love meant never walking away. Now I know it means knowing when to let go. The air outside was brisk with late November wind, the sky wide and clear above Raleigh, and my new apartment was filled with the gentle hush of a holiday spent alone, by choice, for the first time. I set the table for one, a small arrangement of sunflowers in a mason jar and a single place setting, the linen napkin folded just so. This was Thanksgiving, a day I'd always spent under someone else's roof, carrying pies and stories, careful with my words and my help. This year, I woke to quiet, to the warmth of my own sheets, to sunlight filtering through the curtains. The stillness was not loneliness, not this time. It was relief. I moved through my kitchen slowly, cooking a meal that was just for me, roast chicken instead of turkey, mashed sweet potatoes, a little apple crisp. I listened to music, hummed along with old songs, and let myself remember only what I wanted. When I set my plate on the table, I paused for a moment, letting gratitude settle in, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd finally claimed. Freedom. Room to breathe. The gentle rightness of making choices for myself. My phone sat on the counter, buzzing once with a text from Mom, "Happy Thanksgiving, Emily. We love you. Hope you're doing well." I read it, my heart tugging a little, and replied, "Thank you, Mom. Wishing you a peaceful day too." There was nothing more to say, and for the first time I was at peace with that. Robert didn't reach out, and I didn't expect him to. I realized, with a kind of softness, that I didn't need to carry that silence anymore. Letting go wasn't an act of anger, but of mercy, first for them, then for myself. Outside, the sound of laughter rose from the street below, a family coming and going, arms full of foil-covered casseroles, children racing past in jackets too thin for the cold. I watched them through the window, feeling the gentle ache of memory, but also something new, a sense of belonging, not to a house or a family name, but to myself. I wasn't truly alone. Solitude, I realized, could be generous, space for joy, for regret, for new beginnings. After dinner, I slipped on my coat and stepped out into the sharp, golden air. Leaves swirled in the gutter, catching in the cuffs of my jeans. I breathed deep, let my head fall back, watched a flock of birds wheel overhead. I was here. I was whole. Some stories, I thought, only you can write for yourself. I walked past houses aglow with the amber light of Thanksgiving, through streets scented with woodsmoke and autumn. Each window was a story, each life close to me but not unfriendly. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the feeling of being left out. I had chosen this, and in choosing, I'd found peace. As I reached my front steps, I glanced up at the sky, vast and forgiving, and felt the past year settle behind me. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. I was writing my own ending, one day at a time. Looking back on this journey, I see now that letting go was both the hardest and kindest thing I could do, for myself, and for those I love. Sometimes, the truest strength is found not in holding everything together, but in allowing space for each person to grow, even if it means growing apart. Family, after all, is not measured by how much we sacrifice, but by how honestly we care for ourselves and one another. In life, if we learn to listen with compassion and set gentle boundaries, love can still find its way home. If this story resonates with you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts or experiences below. Thank you for sharing this moment with me, wishing you warmth and kindness wherever your own story leads.